Okay, so today we're doing Proofs Part 4, which is the last lesson in this Chapter 2. We are working on proving right angle relationships. We've been through these properties before. One of the things that might be a little bit new is the definition of perpendicular lines, which means that if lines are perpendicular, then there are right angles. And the definition of a right angle, if it's a right angle, then the measure of that angle is going to be 90 degrees. We've gone through these before too. This is one that we need to pay attention to today. If two angles are congruent and supplementary, then each is a right angle. So we'll move on to the first example right away. We are given that angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary. That means that they add up to 180, remember that. And angle 2 and angle 3 are supplementary. So these two angles are supplementary. And this third angle is supplementary to angle 2. So those are the things that we're given. Remember, in class we talked about the given is up here. It's always the first statement, and so therefore you write it in the given spot. The statement that we are asked to prove is always going in the last spot. So let's take a look at the proof now. From step 1 to step 2, what's changed? Well, if we look at the first step, we've got this fancy vocabulary word, supplementary. So if we have a vocabulary word, we know that it's a definition. So if we look at the step 2, the reason that angle 1 and angle 2 equals 180 degrees is because of the definition of supplementary angles. From step 2 to step 3, what's changed there? Well, I noticed that this is the same as this, but this has been changed. And what they've done is they have taken that second statement, measure of angle 2 plus measure of angle 3, and replaced it for 180. So this is substitution. Now we look here, we see this step here says the measure of angle 2 equals the measure of angle 2. Well, that's reflexive. And then, to go from this to this, this is where you might get tripped up. Actually, what they did is you look back at statement number 3, they subtracted the measure of angle 2 from both sides. So that's the subtraction property of equality. And then finally, this last step shows the definition of congruent angles. If we go on to the next proof, we're going to be looking at a different set of angles. And we are looking at the given. The given is angles 1 and 2 are complementary. Angles 3 and 2 are complementary. So the given goes here, and then what we write there is, of course, given. So If we look at the first step, the next step, measure of angle 1 plus measure of angle 2 equals, well, they tell us that it's complementary, so we know that it's 90 degrees. And how do we know that? Because we have complementary, it's a definition. Definition of complementary angles. Well, this next one, the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 90 degrees. Again, a definition of complementary angles. Okay, so now we move on to the next step. The measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 3. Well, actually what they did is they took this 90 and replaced it with this. So that is substitution. Now the next step, the measure of angle 1 equals the measure of angle 3. Well, what did they do? They took the measure of the angle 2 right out of that sentence. They subtracted measure of angle 2. So that's subtraction property of equality. And then we end up with the measure of angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, which is what they asked us to prove in the first place. And that is by the definition of congruent angles. Okay, so the next one shows us that we have two angles that are supplementary. First off, we see the given right here, angle W and angle V are congruent and supplementary. So that is written right here, and we need to put in the given. Okay, so the next step they did was they said, okay, angle W and angle V are congruent, and then they said that angle W, the measure of angle W and the measure of angle V are the same, and that is by the definition of congruent angles. So the next step between this and this is they say the measure of angle W plus the measure of angle V equals 180 degrees. Well, sure, because of supplementary. That's that vocabulary word, that's the definition of supplementary angles. Okay, so in the third step here, what has changed is this piece right here. They've changed the measure of angle V to the measure of angle W. Well, we already said that they were equal up here, so we can do that because of substitution. To go from this step to this step, what they did was they just added these two together, or they simplified. So now they said that the measure of angle W is 90. How did they get that? Well, they divided both sides by 2. Division property. Okay, so now we've got the measure of angle V equals 90. Well, how did we get that? Well, up here, we already said that the measures are equal. So that is simply substitution again. And then we go right here, we see measure of W and V are right angles, and that would be, there's another vocabulary word, the definition of right angles. I'm not going to take the time to go over this one, but you should look it over because it's got different definitions in there. We've got vertical angles, but I'm going to move on to the next one. All right, last one for today. We are looking at proof here that says the given is J is perpendicular to K. J is perpendicular to K. So this means that that is given. If you look in the picture, they're saying line J is perpendicular to K. So we look at the second reason here. Angle 1 is a right angle. Well, we know that because of the definition of perpendicular lines. So we say, okay, yeah, angle 1 is a right angle. We know that. So now we've got the measure of angle 1 is 90 degrees. Well, that is also a definition. Definition of right angles. Now we see angle 2 is a right angle. Well, that is the definition of perpendicular lines again. And the measure of angle 2 is 90 degrees. Well, that's from the right angle. Definition of a right angle. So then we have the final one, which says that measure of angle 1 equals the measure of angle 2. Well, we have just substituted. We have substituted this 90 right here, the measure of angle 2. So that's substitution. Be prepared for some review. We're looking forward to setting some time outside to have a review with you guys. So be ready tomorrow with questions, and we will see you then. Have a good night.